Millionaire decided to follow his maid after work. But he never imagined what he would find. Before today's story begins, tell me in the comments, where are you watching from? I'd love to know how far these stories are reaching. And if you enjoy touching love stories with twists and true feelings, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. That really helps it grow and brings even more stories your way. The afternoon in Charleston carried that dense, humid heat that seemed to cling to the skin. The sky, a soft blue, was crisscrossed by the branches of magnolia trees surrounding the Harrington estate, one of the grandest mansions in the city's historic district. The front garden was immaculate, with stone fountains and flowers in shades of white and purple. The house's facade was classic, with white columns and tall, spotless glass windows reflecting the sunlight. Lucas Harrington, 32, watched it all from the balcony of his second-floor suite. He wore a slightly unbuttoned white shirt and light linen trousers, his ash-blonde hair perfectly styled, and his cold gaze hidden behind sunglasses. He had the bearing of someone used to being obeyed, a body shaped by rigorous workouts, and the expression of someone who is rarely contradicted. Yes, he was handsome, but there was a cynicism in his looks, as if everything around him was merely a controlled, decorative backdrop. His reputation preceded him: filthy rich, heir to the Harrington real estate empire, a regular at lavish social events, and a collector of fleeting affairs. No woman ever lasted more than a weekend in his life. And that's exactly how he liked it. When the agency's car discreetly pulled up at the house's side entrance, he watched from the window, showing no interest. Just another housemaid, another ordinary face. That's what he thought. Until she stepped out. Evelyn Parker was young, with delicate features and an upright posture. She wore a simple, clean uniform, but her dark brown hair, tied in a hurried bun, had loose strands framing her fair, lightly freckled face. Her green eyes scanned the surroundings with caution. She had a restrained beauty, no makeup, no forced vanity. She walked with confident steps, like someone who already knew her place and had no intention of asking permission to exist in it. Lucas frowned, intrigued. He was used to eyes seeking his attention, shy or overly friendly smiles. But Evelyn didn't look at him once as she passed in the hallway, carrying buckets and cloths. Not a glance, not a pause. As if he were part of the furniture. He slowly descended the stairs, watching her from a distance, pretending to review some papers. She silently cleaned the entrance hall floor with firm, swift movements. When one of the cloths accidentally fell near his shoes, she bent down, picked it up, and simply muttered, "Excuse me." Nothing more. Lucas stared at her. She didn't lift her eyes. That both irritated and fascinated him. Leaning against the doorframe, he crossed his arms and remarked, in a provocative tone, "First day and already trying to impress?" Evelyn, still with her back to him, kept cleaning. "It's not for you, sir. It's just my job." The answer hit his ego like a brick. He let out a low, disbelieving laugh. This was new. This was intriguing. As he climbed the stairs back up, deep in thought, he murmured to himself, "She's just playing hard to get." But something inside him, no matter how much he tried to deny it, knew that wasn't it. There was something different about that woman, and he had to find out what it was. The next morning, Lucas woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely crept into the mansion's rooms, but he was already on the balcony, wearing a light robe and holding a cup of coffee. His eyes scanned the garden with a restlessness he didn't fully understand. He was looking for her. Evelyn appeared a few minutes later, walking with her hair tied back again, this time in a tighter bun. She wore the same modest uniform as the day before, no earrings, no perfume, nothing suggesting vanity. She carried a bucket and a basket of neatly folded laundry. Lucas slowly descended the steps, letting the aroma of coffee fill the air as he approached the young woman who was kneeling, organizing cleaning cloths. He stopped beside her, and in the tone he used when testing someone's limits, said, "You're always so quiet. Maybe you're afraid you'll fall for me." Evelyn didn't even look up. She kept arranging the cloths calmly, as if he were just background noise, or maybe I'm just focused on my work, she replied firmly. Lucas let out a short, almost mocking laugh. He sat on the edge of a nearby marble bench and watched her, as if she were a puzzle he needed to solve. "You know who I am, right? The kind of life I lead. Do you have any idea how many women have come through here trying to please me?" Evelyn paused briefly, adjusted a fold in the cloth as if it were the most important thing in the world, and said, "And how many stayed?" Lucas blinked, surprised. For the first time, a maid dared to answer with something other than obedience. That didn't irritate him. On the contrary, it only fueled his desire to provoke her further. Later, he had the housekeeper discreetly deliver an expensive white gold necklace inside a small velvet box left in Evelyn's closet, with a note, "A touch of shine for someone who hasn't learned to shine yet." By the end of the day, the same box was left untouched on the kitchen counter. Evelyn left no message, made no scene. She simply returned it. Lucas found her shortly after, in the backyard, sweeping fallen magnolia leaves. "Didn't like the gift?" he asked, stopping behind her with his arms crossed. "I didn't ask for anything," she replied, without turning her face. Lucas walked toward her slowly. When he stopped beside her, his eyes searched for hers. Evelyn, however, kept her gaze on the ground. "You don't seem to understand how things work around here." She slowly stood up, broom in hand, raised her eyes and looked at him firmly, as if unafraid of anything he might say. "Maybe you're the one who doesn't understand." The silence between them was sharp. For the first time, Lucas felt disarmed. Not with anger, but with something more unsettling, an admiration he couldn't suppress. He watched her walk away, going back to work as if nothing had happened. But something inside him had shifted. That woman was not like the others, and that unsettled him in a way he would never admit out loud. From the balcony, watching from afar the housekeeper, a middle-aged woman who had worked with the Harrington family for decades, murmured quietly to herself, for the first time, "Maybe he's the one who's going to learn a lesson." Lucas returned inside in silence, but his mind was stuck on that last sentence. Maybe he really didn't understand how things worked. Not in her world. That night, for the first time in years, he slept restlessly. And with no one by his side, Lucas spent the whole day trying to focus on the reports his advisors had placed on the marble desk in his office. But the words got scrambled. The letters dissolved in his memory as if they no longer made sense. Ever since the necklace was returned, Evelyn hadn't left his mind. The way she stood up to him without yelling, without provoking, just with the firmness of someone who knows who they are, had shaken him. It was new territory for him. Lucas had always known how to manipulate desire, but he didn't know how to deal with the absence of it. And that woman's lack of interest gnawed at him like a hidden wound. Around 6 in the evening, he saw through the security camera by the side entrance that she was leaving. Uniform stored away, a worn fabric bag slung over her shoulder, neutral expression. A house driver offered a ride, as always, but she declined with a polite gesture. Lucas closed his laptop, tossed his blazer over the back of the chair, and grabbed his car keys. He slipped discreetly into his black sedan with tinted windows and followed her through the city. Evelyn walked with confident steps, without hesitation, as if she knew every shortcut. She crossed downtown Charleston, sidestepped tourists, turned onto older, dimmer streets. The streetlights there flickered unreliably. The houses had no ornamental fences or cameras, just simple doors and clotheslines with still damp laundry. After nearly 40 minutes of walking, she entered a small house made of old bricks, with faded paint and a yard covered in dry leaves. Lucas parked at a safe distance. He watched through the car window's crack. The windows were open, without curtains. He could see inside. A frail-looking woman sat in a worn armchair, a blanket covering her knees. She was coughing softly. Evelyn entered, knelt in front of her, and gently held her hand. She smiled. For the first time, the smile Lucas had never seen. "Hi, Mom. How are you today?" she said tenderly. The woman smiled back, barely able to speak. Evelyn kissed her forehead and headed to the kitchen, where a boy around 10 was working on a notebook. She tousled his hair and asked, "Did you finish all your homework properly?" "I did, but can you help me with the literature part?" I didn't understand the metaphor. Lucas's eyes widened. Evelyn dropped her bag, sat next to her brother, and began to explain patiently. She spoke with a light in her eyes that he had never seen while she worked. There was no coldness there, no stiffness. There was life. Half an hour later, she left the house again. Lucas, on impulse, followed her once more. Evelyn entered through a rusted side gate of a modest community school where a few lights were on. She climbed an exterior staircase and went straight into a brightly lit classroom. Through the window, Lucas saw children sitting in makeshift chairs, pencils in hand. She was writing confidently on the board, full of enthusiasm. She explained. Told stories, smiled. She teaches after working all day. He murmured to himself inside the car. Feeling a knot in his chest, it was in that moment that Lucas Harrington, the man used to buying everything with charm or money, realized there was something he could never own. The integrity of a woman who didn't pretend to be less than she was or more. He stayed there, parked for nearly an hour, watching through the window like a spectator of a life that wasn't his. And for the first time, he felt small and empty. Back at home that night, he didn't turn on the radio, didn't answer any calls. He walked straight past the living room, dropped his keys on the table, and sat silently on the dark couch. Her face while teaching, her caring gesture toward her mother, the simplicity of how she lived, all spun in his mind like an endless movie. And then, without meaning to, he whispered to himself, "She's everything I never knew I needed." But he still didn't know what to do with that feeling, nor with the guilt beginning to grow inside him for having judged her. That night, Lucas Harrington didn't turn on a single light upon entering the mansion. He left his shoes in the hallway corner and crossed the rooms in silence, as if afraid to disturb the emptiness that now felt heavier than ever. The walls, once symbols of status and power, felt cold, impersonal. The marble floor chilled his feet. He sat on the large sofa in the main room, elbows on his knees and his face in his hands. The ticking of the wall clock was the only sound filling the space. But inside him, there was a storm. Evelyn. He tried to deny it, tried to laugh at himself at first, as if it were just a fleeting romantic fantasy. But it wasn't. Something had changed in him, and he felt it. She didn't look at him like the other women. She didn't smile out of obligation. She didn't bow to his presence. Evelyn didn't need him. And maybe that was exactly why she was the only one he truly desired. The next day, Lucas came down the stairs already dressed, his shirt sleeves rolled up to the forearms and without his usual blazer. The morning sun streamed through the tall stained glass windows, tinting the floor in golden tones. Evelyn was in the dining room, collecting glasses from the sideboard with fine gloves and careful movements. He watched her for a moment in silence. The loose strands of her brown hair shimmered in the daylight. There was something almost poetic in the way she moved, as if everything she touched earned respect. "Have you always been like this, so different?" he asked suddenly, his voice lower than usual. She didn't turn right away. She finished placing the last glass on the tray before answering. Different from what, exactly? From everyone, he said. From all the people who come near me trying to be noticed, trying to be seen. Evelyn looked at him at last, but she didn't smile. She didn't soften her expression. She simply said, maybe that's because I never needed to be seen. I just needed to be heard. Lucas fell silent. That hit him in an unexpected way. That afternoon, he tried to focus on work, but for the first time, he found himself reading contracts with indifference. The business world seemed distant, cold, insignificant compared to the image of Evelyn comforting her mother the night before, or reading with her brother, or teaching children with a sparkle in her eyes. He began to think of questions he had never allowed himself to ask before. Who was he outside that mansion? What did he really know of others' pain? Who would love him if he lost everything? At the end of the day, seeing Evelyn quietly pass through the hallway with a basket of laundry in her arms, he said, almost on impulse, "You don't want anything from me, do you?" She stopped, looked at him seriously, and replied, "Wanting something from someone isn't the same as selling yourself." And she walked away without waiting for a response. Lucas leaned against the hallway wall, feeling a weight in his chest he couldn't name. Admiration, respect, desire. To be seen as someone better. For the first time, he didn't just want to win over a woman. He wanted to be worthy of her, but something told him that this path wouldn't be easy. Evelyn wasn't the kind of woman who gave in to sweet words or empty promises. She carried scars he didn't know yet, and that might drive her away forever. If he wasn't careful, Lucas spent the following days in turmoil, replaying every glance, every word Evelyn had spoken. Something inside him had already changed, but he still didn't know how to express it without sounding like the man she had rejected. He tried to approach more subtly, more humanely, but he was still Lucas Harrington, and his shadow was far too long to disappear overnight. On a cloudy Thursday morning, he saw her sweeping the main entrance with the focus of someone trying to keep their mind busy. Evelyn had a serious look, and the light dark circles under her eyes revealed she had slept little. Her light gray uniform, always clean and neatly pressed, looked tighter across her shoulders that day, as if the weight of her responsibilities had worn her down. Lucas, wearing a dark wool sweater and jeans, unusually casual for him, approached with a cup of coffee in hand. He was nervous, though he wouldn't admit it. "Do you like your coffee strong or weak?" he asked, stopping a few steps from her. Evelyn looked up, but didn't smile. She simply answered calmly, "I usually don't accept things that come with hidden intentions." He took a deep breath, tried not to back off, even feeling the sting. "There are no hidden intentions, Evelyn. Not now. I just wanted to talk." She put the broom down, crossed her arms, and looked at him. Her green eyes were colder than the sky that morning. "Do you know what's worse than someone who lies openly?" she asked, voice low but firm. "It's someone who thinks they can play at being good just because they're bored with their own emptiness." Lucas felt his stomach twist. He tried to reply, but she went on, "Men like you only know how to toy with what others fight to protect." The silence that followed was brutal. He lowered his gaze, feeling a shame he didn't recognize. Evelyn picked up the broom, turned her back to him, and returned to her work. Lucas stood there, the coffee cooling in his hand. That day, he didn't go to the office. He locked himself in his room, took off the blazer he still wore out of habit, and looked at himself in the large, sweet mirror. The reflection unsettled him. The man in front of him was neat, well-groomed, clean-shaven, but the eyes were empty. "Who have I become?" he murmured. "Who have I always been?" He ran his fingers along the gold frame of the mirror as if searching for an answer. And for the first time, He understood what Evelyn meant. He had tried to seduce her, then tried to redeem himself with easy gestures. But he had never offered what truly mattered: truth. He lay on the couch alone, staring at the high ceiling. The mansion felt larger that night. And emptier. In the corner of the room, an old copy of Wuthering Heights sat dusty on a shelf. Evelyn liked that book. She had mentioned in a rare moment of distraction that it was her favorite story. Lucas got up, took the book, and sat again, holding the cover in his hands. Maybe. "There's still time to start over," he said softly. But he knew the road to her wouldn't be simple. The next morning, Charleston woke to a light drizzle. The Harrington mansion was quieter than ever. The sound of high heels in the halls had disappeared. The forced laughter at dinners, the clinking glasses over empty reasons, the casual flings, all had been canceled. Lucas Harrington, once the center of the local elite's attention, had vanished from the spotlight. That morning he came down to breakfast looking different. He wore a worn cotton sweater and plain sneakers, his hair tousled and a stubble on his face. The housekeeper watched from afar, saying nothing, but with a look that mixed surprise and concern. He sat at the table with a cup of tea, not wine, not imported coffee. Silence. At the company office, the partners began to notice the shift. Lucas refused multi-million-dollar projects that involved demolishing old neighborhoods to build luxury condos. In meetings, his attitude was different. "Don't you see? We're building over stories. Over families that will lose what little they have so we can make a few more millions." One of the senior directors, a longtime friend of his father, shot back sarcastically, "Since when did you get sensitive, Lucas? This is business, not charity." He stared at the man for long seconds before replying, "Since I realized the success you all worship comes at the cost of lives you refuse to see." The room fell silent. Lucas stood up and left before the presentation even ended. He no longer wanted to be part of meetings where no one spoke about people-only numbers. That night, heart restless and mind in quiet collapse, he grabbed a cap, threw on a gray hoodie, and walked through the streets. He didn't tell anyone, didn't bring security, didn't get into his sports car. He walked for more than half an hour until he reached that narrow street with low lamp posts and makeshift gardens. The neighborhood where Evelyn lived felt like a different world. One where people greeted each other on the sidewalk, where the clatter of pots came with laughter, and where porch lights weren't just decoration, they were warmth. Lucas stopped across the street. Leaning against a tree, hands in his pockets, he watched the lit window of the small brick house. He saw Evelyn come in, carry a grocery bag to the kitchen, talk with her brother, and then sit next to her mother to read a passage from a book aloud. She smiled. A different smile, a real one. One he'd never seen in the mansion. Lucas swallowed hard. His chest tightened. That simple world, full of meaning, made him feel small. But at the same time, it made him truly want to belong to something. Real for the first time. On the way back, he passed a group of teens playing basketball on the cracked cement court at the community school. One of them shouted, "Hey, mister, you gonna play with us or just keep watching life go by?" Lucas smirked, nodded at them, and kept walking. The next day at the office, he did something unexpected. He ordered a review of contracts involving developments in vulnerable communities. Canceled 3 of them. He gave no explanation, just said, "We're going to build with conscience, or I'll build alone." Once again, he faced looks of contempt and mockery. But he didn't back down. That night, he returned to the same neighborhood. He didn't speak to Evelyn, didn't make himself known. He just stood there again, among the shadows and light drizzle, watching her be herself and wishing, more and more, to be someone worthy. It was late afternoon when the sky began to darken. Rapidly, not from nightfall, but from storm clouds gathering over Charleston. The air was heavy, as if the world sensed something was about to happen. Lucas once again walked the streets of Evelyn's neighborhood, his steps slow and silent, like a ritual now necessary to feel alive. On the sidewalk in front of the red brick house, he stopped quietly under a tree. The porch light was on. The small garden held wilted flowers and dry leaves, a reflection of time and daily struggles. From where he stood, Lucas could hear laughter from the kitchen. Evelyn and her brother talking. A simple sound, but full of meaning. Suddenly, the laughter stopped. The front door burst open and Evelyn ran out, yelling her brother's name. "Daniel, call for help, Mom." "She's not breathing." Lucas froze. Instinctively, he ran toward the house. He found Evelyn kneeling on the living room floor, holding her mother by the shoulders. The woman was pale, motionless, her eyes half open, her breath too faint to notice. Daniel trembled on the phone, trying to give the address to the emergency dispatcher. "Help me. Please, help me." Evelyn cried, her hands trembling as she searched for a pulse, any sign. Lucas didn't think. He gently but firmly lifted the woman in his arms. "Let's go. The nearest hospital is 7 blocks away. Come with me." Evelyn ran beside him, unaware that she was crying. In the back seat of the car, she held her mother's hand in desperation. She whispered prayers, fragmented sentences, broken pleas. Between sobs, Lucas drove fast, never recklessly, but with urgency etched on his face. At the E, he rushed the woman in his arms until 2 nurses received her. Evelyn followed, but was stopped at the resuscitation room's doors. She stood still, eyes fixed on the closed door. Her whole body trembled. Lucas approached slowly, hesitant. He wanted to comfort her, but didn't know how. Evelyn turned to him, eyes red, breath uneven. Without thinking, she collapsed into his arms, burying her face in the chest she had avoided for so long. The strength she always carried poured out, like sand between her fingers. "I'm not strong all the time, and I hate that." Lucas held her tightly. The touch was sincere. No desire, no hidden intentions. Just presence. "Heart, then let me be strong for you. Just for today." Evelyn didn't respond. She just closed her eyes and let herself be held. For the first time, she allowed herself to be comforted by someone who, even if he didn't deserve it yet, was there. The door to the room opened and a nurse appeared. "She's stable. We'll keep her under observation. But it's serious. She needs absolute rest." Evelyn nodded, quickly wiping her tears. She wanted to seem composed. Lucas accompanied her to the waiting room without saying a word. He just sat beside her and offered silence, a silence that, for the first time, didn't weigh her down. It comforted. That night, Lucas didn't go home. He slept in a hospital chair, head bowed, beside a woman who hadn't yet forgiven him, but who had let him in, even if only through a crack. 2 days had passed since Evelyn collapsed into Lucas's arms. Her mother remained hospitalized in delicate but stable condition. Evelyn returned from the hospital every day more exhausted, carrying the weight of a routine that gave no rest, taking care of her brother, keeping the small household running, and wrestling with the emotional chaos Lucas's unexpected presence was stirring inside her. That afternoon, the sky was clear, the sunset casting orange, and soft tones across the neighborhood facades. Evelyn sat on the porch of the small house, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, wearing an old t-shirt and worn jeans. Her eyes were fixed on some vague point in the street, as if her mind wandered to places she herself tried to avoid. Then, sound of steady footsteps approached slowly. She didn't need to look to know who it was. The rhythm was his. The hesitation in each step, too. Lucas stopped at the small, rusty iron gate, hands in his pockets, and a look that held no arrogance, no self-defense. He was clean, freshly shaved, but his eyes showed wear not from lack of sleep, but from the burden he could no longer carry alone. Evelyn stood slowly. They faced each other, only a few meters apart, separated by many unspoken words. I thought, "You wouldn't come back here," she said, not coldly, but without warmth. Lucas took a deep breath. His tone was different, softer, real. No rehearsed charm. No usual sarcasm. Just truth. I needed time. "To come the right way," he said. "No masks. No armor I've worn all my life." She waited in silence. "I followed you," he confessed. Eyes locked on hers. "That night. I followed you thinking I'd find some dirty secret. Something to help me understand why you wouldn't bend like the others." The silence thickened. "But I didn't find any dirt, Evelyn," he continued, his voice cracking. "I found the only woman who's ever made me want to change." She blinked slowly, as if absorbing every word with caution. A glint of moisture began to form in her eyes, and for a moment it was unclear if she was crying from pain or relief. "You saw me at my worst, Lucas," she said quietly. "In my simple home, on my most tired days, in my most vulnerable moment, and still you're here." "Because it was exactly there that I found myself," he replied. "It was by seeing who you are that I realized what I never was." Evelyn looked away for a moment, trying to contain the tremor in her voice. "I don't want the man you were," she said, looking back at him. "But maybe there's something in who you're trying to become." Lucas looked at her deeply. He didn't step closer, didn't reach out. He knew any rushed move could ruin everything. But in that moment, something between them either broke or was built. A new beginning, still fragile, but possible. Evelyn, her eyes glistening, sat back down on the porch chair. "Do you want to come in?" she asked simply, like someone offering shelter to someone back from war. Lucas nodded silently. He passed through the gate slowly, feeling the firm ground beneath his feet, as if finally he knew where he stood. The days that followed were different. There were no promises, no declarations, just presence. Lucas began frequenting Evelyn's house gradually, respecting her silences as if learning a new language. Her mother was still recovering, and he offered to bring medications, run errands, or simply sit beside her younger brother to help with schoolwork. He didn't do it expecting anything in return. He just did it. Evelyn observed. Not with an open heart, but with her feet still firmly on the ground. Life had hurt her too many times for her to give in to the first visible change. She needed time. She needed to see consistency. And Lucas knew that. That week, on a cold autumn afternoon, he showed up with a sack of soil and a few lavender seedlings. He didn't ask, didn't say anything. He knelt by the small garden bed Evelyn tended to when she had time and began planting in. Silence. From the doorway, she crossed her arms and asked, "And since when do you know how to work with soil?" Lucas looked up, hands dirty, wind-messed hair. He smiled softly. "Since I realized that living things only grow with patience." She looked away, hiding a brief smile. A few days later, it was Evelyn who offered him a cup of tea while Lucas read one of the books she had lent him. They sat on the porch under the soft evening light, not touching. Their shoulders aligned but never touched. Words came little by little about childhood, fears, losses. She spoke of her father's absence. He, of the emotional absence of his mother. Between each sentence, silence returned. But it was a comfortable silence, almost intimate. One night, after dropping her off following a quick hospital visit, Lucas hesitated before leaving. Evelyn, coat in her arms, watched him from the gate. The street was quiet, the yellow streetlights casting soft shadows on the pavement. "You don't have to come every day, you know," she said, a mix of gratitude and self-defense in her tone. "I know," he replied sincerely, "but I want to." She looked at him for a few seconds, as if searching his face for something, then said, "I just have one condition." "Anything," he replied, ready to listen. "Don't love me in a hurry." "I couldn't survive another disappointment." Lucas nodded, without trying to touch her, without asking for anything. "Then I'll love you slowly." And that's how they moved forward, small steps. Walks around the block, shared readings, quiet visits. Nothing physical, nothing rushed, but everything real. Until, on a rainy night, he showed up with an umbrella and found her sitting on the front step, arms wrapped around her knees. Her mother had worsened. Emotional exhaustion weighed in her eyes. Lucas knelt in front of her, not even noticing the rain soaking him. "Stay," she whispered, breaking the barrier for the first time with a trembling voice. "Just stay." He stayed, sat beside her, letting the umbrella fall, the rain soaking them both. And then, without warning, Evelyn turned to him. Her eyes were wet, but not with tears, with surrender. It was she who leaned in slowly and kissed him, a kiss without urgency, without spectacle. A quiet kiss, but deep, as if everything repressed had finally found shelter. When their lips parted, she said, almost in a whisper, "I just needed to know you'd stay," even without promises. And he, eyes filled with truth, replied, "I just needed you to learn what real love is." 2 years had passed since that night Evelyn and Lucas finally allowed themselves to love without rushing. The neighborhood where she grew up still had cracked sidewalks and flowers hanging on walls, but something had changed. There was more light, more color, more hope. Evelyn, now with a literature degree in hand, founded a small community school in an old abandoned church, renovated with anonymously donated resources. She taught every day with the same sparkle in her eyes from when she read to the neighborhood children, only now with a voice, structure, and freedom. She was respected. She was heard. Lucas, meanwhile, remained at the helm of his company. He didn't abandon business, but he reinvented it. The Harrington name, once synonymous with luxury and exclusivity, now stood for dignified housing and accessible projects. He created social financing programs, revitalized forgotten neighborhoods, and implemented an investment model that prioritized dignity over profit. Of course, he faced resistance. Old partners walked away. Investors withdrew. But Lucas didn't back down. For the first time, his fortune had purpose. And so did his life. They lived together not in a mansion, but in a modest house surrounded by trees and children running through the school garden. They didn't make public appearances. They weren't in society pages. They lived on the outskirts of noise, but at the center of what truly mattered. On a spring afternoon, Evelyn was organizing a book fair in the school courtyard. Her hair was in a loose braid, reading glasses on the tip of her nose, hand-stained with paint from helping students make banners. Lucas arrived with a box of new books donated by a publisher he himself had convinced to join the project. She looked at him from a distance, smiled, and said, "You're late." "At least I didn't lose my way." "Or myself," he replied, with that calm gaze she had learned to trust. At the end of the day, they sat together on the wooden bench beneath the oldest tree in the courtyard, watching the students playing. Nearby, books spread out over makeshift tables, and life pulsing within those simple walls. Lucas took her hand and whispered, "If one day someone asks me, what made me a better man, I'll say it was the no you gave me." Evelyn gently squeezed his fingers. Sometimes it's in the no that we find the yes to ourselves. They smiled at each other and stayed there, needing nothing more. And now tell me, what did you think of this story? From 0 to 10, what score does it deserve? Leave your comment below. I'd really love to know how this story touched you. If this story moved you in any way, give it a like, Share it with someone who needs to hear something like this. And subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next stories. And before you go, I've picked out another story that's even more emotional and sure to touch your heart. You won't want to miss it.